Do you want to know what women really want? The Man's Guide to Women reveals scientifically proven secrets from the Love Lab with John and Julie Gottman.
Popular internet culture frames attraction as a simple, aggressive formula. It suggests a requirement for six-pack abs, high net worth bank accounts, and alpha dominance. Clinical data, however, tells a different story. Stephen Hawking mapped the universe's most complex mysteries. Yet, when asked what he thought about most, his answer was women. They are a complete mystery. Sigmund Freud spent 30 years researching the feminine soul. He concluded his career admitting he could never answer what a woman actually wants. If the most significant scientific and psychological minds of the century were confounded by female psychology, the generic advice sold by modern dating gurus likely lacks any real substance. Understanding this dynamic requires looking at the raw clinical data. Researchers at the Love Lab identified a specific biological and psychological trait that women prioritize above all others. Their data points to one consistent requirement: trustworthiness. In a clinical context, trustworthiness is defined as reliability and accountability. It is the practice of being exactly who you claim to be and doing exactly what you say you will do. This data reveals a disconnect in how partners experience conflict. Male complaints focus on high levels of fighting and a lack of physical intimacy. Women report different stressors. They cite a partner's lack of emotional presence and a deficit in genuine connection. These data points represent a shared equation. Solving the woman's need for trustworthiness simultaneously addresses the primary causes of male dissatisfaction. Trustworthiness is a biological requirement because of how the brain processes threat. A woman's baseline reality is deeply influenced by physical and emotional vulnerability in a way that a man's simply is not. At the University of California, Berkeley, researchers tested this baseline by measuring the startle reflex in male and female subjects after firing a very loud blank gunshot. While the physical reflex was the same, the psychological processing was split. The men reported feelings of immediate anger and a desire for aggression. The women processed the same stimulus as intense, lingering fear. This means high-stress situations make women more susceptible to fear conditioning. They are biologically inclined to register environmental threats more acutely than men. We can clearly observe this in the lab. A University of Virginia study placed women inside an MRI machine. Holding a stranger's hand did nothing to change the neurological response. However, when holding her husband's hand, the scanner showed the amygdala, the brain's fear center, completely deactivated. A woman's trust serves as a neurological toggle, capable of deactivating the brain's response to threat. This hardware is managed by the rhythmic cycles of the female endocrine system, specifically the fluctuations of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. During the first 2 weeks of a cycle, peaking estrogen levels typically make women more communicative, socially relaxed, and emotionally sensitive. The second half of the cycle is defined by a rise in progesterone. This shift often increases the need for solitude, while making environmental stressors feel much more intense. These shifts even influence attraction. Research suggests women unconsciously prefer protective traits during ovulation and more communicative, nurturing behaviors at other points in the cycle. A partner who understands these biological rhythms adapts his behavior to provide the specific support required by her current endocrine state. Clinicians use a clinical framework called attunement to maintain this crucial sense of safety. The A stands for attend. This involves completely removing distractions, like phones or televisions, to prove that her words and presence have your full attention. Turn toward is a physical requirement. Female intimacy requires face-to-face contact. Understand requires asking questions, resisting the urge to offer immediate solutions. Non-defensively listen means hearing her frustration without arguing or making excuses. Empathize involves reading body language and affirming her emotions, which actively lowers her physiological stress levels. Attunement functions as a clinical protocol to maintain the trust and safety required for a stable relationship. The causal link is clear. Attunement builds trust, and trust provides the emotional and physical safety women require. When a woman feels this safety, the primary sources of relationship conflict disappear, leading to less fighting and more frequent intimacy. This safety is the biological prerequisite for desire. Without it, the brain's fear center effectively blocks arousal. Once the barrier of fear is removed through trust, how does a man engage the chemical mechanisms of physical attraction? Establishing safety is only the first step in the science of attraction. Jonathan sat at the head of the table. 5 people took turns speaking, and every suggestion they made remained tentative until he validated their course of action. In his daily life, Jonathan was a college student and a part-time barista. But at this table, as the dungeon master, he dispatched orders with absolute confidence and fairness. Sandra, who had previously felt no chemistry with him, suddenly found herself attracted to his command of the room. High social status is often equated with wealth or job titles, but it is actually dependent on the specific room you occupy. In that living room, Jonathan was the commander-in-chief. Displaying unequivocal decision-making and a commanding posture overrides traditional social hierarchies. To an observer, these behaviors signal high status regardless of a man's external professional standing. At an unconscious level, humans are biologically driven to seek out mates that will produce viable offspring. The most basic physical indicator for this viability is facial symmetry. This data shows the statistical deficit. Only 53.5% of men possess the symmetrical faces that trigger automatic biological attraction. Those in the asymmetrical 46% rely on nonverbal cues to signal their value and offset this physical deficit. Many men believe they are exercising free will when they choose which woman to approach in a social setting. In reality, women choreograph these interactions. Using subtle, subconscious cues, they signal who is allowed to approach and who is not. When psychologist Monica Moore scored these nonverbal behaviors, they predicted a man's approach with over 90% accuracy. Approaching without this silent authorization is the primary reason for rejection. Attraction begins with a high volume of subconscious signals. These include micro-expressions like a short glance followed by a darting movement of the eyes. Dr. Moore cataloged 52 distinct flirting signals, ranging from a simple hair toss or neck exposure to a rhythmic swaying of the hips. Indicators of disinterest are equally specific. A woman may engage in polite conversation while subtly pointing her feet away, or scanning the room over a man's head, clear signs that she is not open to further contact. To verify interest, move to a different location in the room. If she finds your eyes and repeats the glancing routine from a distance, the signal is confirmed. Successful courtship requires identifying and verifying these nonverbal cues before initiating a conversation. To increase the likelihood of being signaled, men utilize a behavior called space maximizing. This is the primary nonverbal indicator of social dominance. Successful men show their dominance by stretching out their legs or throwing an arm around the back of an adjacent chair, effectively owning the space they occupy. Intragender touching, such as a firm slap on a male peer's back, further broadcasts an aura of high status to observers. Weakness is conversely signaled through closed body movements. Folding arms across the chest or crossing legs at the knee makes a man appear less confident and less desirable. Social dominance is not defined by aggression, but by the relaxed and unapologetic ownership of physical space. Beyond visual cues, attraction is influenced by a man's chemical profile. Cortisol, the stress hormone, acts as a deterrent to attraction. Women find low-stress, calm men much more attractive. Remaining calm during high-stakes situations was a critical evolutionary advantage for survival. This internal calm is reflected in a man's voice. Research at Duke University found that CEOs with lower vocal pitches manage larger companies and earn significantly higher salaries than those with higher voices. In every U.S. presidential election between 1960 and 2000, the candidate with the lower-pitched voice won the popular vote. Women respond most favorably to deep voices that are breathy and tender, which project a sense of protective safety. In contrast, an aggressive or intimidating deep voice projects danger. If a woman does not feel safe, she will not be attracted. Biological authority is signaled through physiological calm and vocal resonance. Power is most effectively demonstrated when it is quiet and controlled. Once a date is secured, rehearsed lines and performance tactics must be abandoned. These are often interpreted as a lack of authenticity. The primary goal of the first date is to establish physical and emotional safety. Use open-ended questions to encourage her to tell her story. By asking about her passions and life dreams, you place her experiences at the center of the encounter. Social bonding can be accelerated through light tactile contact. A brief 1 to 2 second touch on the forearm when making a request increases the level of comfort and trust. Undivided, authentic attention acts as a powerful aphrodisiac. In a social environment full of performance, transparency is a significant strategic asset. Human biology contains a crossover between the physiological symptoms of fear and sexual arousal. Engaging in activities like riding a roller coaster or bungee jumping triggers a powerful rush of shared adrenaline. The amygdala is the region of the brain where fear is processed, but it is also one of the areas responsible for sexual arousal. The two experiences can often be confused by the nervous system. This shared excitement releases a hormonal mix of dopamine and norepinephrine, the same chemicals present when humans fall in love. By sharing a moment of controlled, safe terror, you can stimulate the exact chemical markers of romantic infatuation. Using these biological triggers is powerful, as they can create an intense state of infatuation known as limerence. These methods bypass conscious logic, influencing the way both parties perceive the reality of their connection. Understanding these biological patterns transforms your approach to attraction, moving you from a passive observer to an intentional participant. 2/3 of women report having ended a relationship because of a single bad kiss. That initial physical interaction carries a staggering amount of weight. The lips contain massive numbers of nerve endings, occupying a surprisingly large portion of the brain's sensory cortex. A kiss is a high-speed biological audit. When a man reads a woman's nonverbal signals and approaches slowly, those ignited nerve endings release a massive flood of feel-good hormones into her brain. But excessive saliva or aggressive pressure instantly short-circuits that response. Nobody wants to be treated like a chew toy. The first kiss is a make-or-break physiological exam. It determines within seconds if the relationship will survive its first day. Long before lips even touch, another biological screening is already happening. Naturally occurring chemical signals called pheromones constantly bypass our logic and communicate directly with the brain. At Stockholm's Karolinska Institute, scientists used brain imaging to show that a chemical in male sweat lights up the female brain's reproductive behavior center. This is sheer genetic destiny. You will smell right to some people and wrong to others, and no expensive cologne can manufacture compatibility if the base chemistry isn't there. When the pheromones do align and basic hygiene is maintained, the result is an immediate, powerful sense of sensuality and comfort. Passing these initial physical and chemical tests triggers an incredible euphoric high. But that same euphoria creates a serious psychological vulnerability. During the morning after a new connection, the intense bond you feel is entirely real. Your brain chemistry has been thoroughly hijacked. Physical intimacy and affection trigger the release of oxytocin, the hormone responsible for human bonding and attachment. To measure the psychological power of this hormone, researchers at the University of Zurich had subjects play an investment game relying entirely on trust. Participants who were administered a nasal spray of oxytocin continued to blindly share their money with other players, even after those players demonstrably betrayed them and stole their funds. Brain scans revealed exactly why. Oxytocin physically shuts down activity in the amygdala, the brain's primary threat detection center. Intimacy biologically disables your ability to sense danger, leaving your wallet and your life wide open to terrible decisions. Psychologists call this early, obsessive stage of attraction limerence. It is a heavy hormonal cocktail that keeps you awake, kills your appetite, and induces pure ecstasy. With the fear center offline, limerence creates the illusion of rational thought, all while you actively ignore massive, glaring red flags. Consider the cinematic example of Dan from Fatal Attraction. Drowning in this exact hormonal cocktail, he blindly walks straight into a devastating affair. The woman he chose was toxic from the very beginning. His altered state simply hid her true nature until it was too late. Limerence primes you to invite destructive personalities into your life, leaving you defenseless against an elaborate biological illusion. To separate a reliable partner from a temporary chemical rush, you have to manually engage your rational brain and audit her true profile. This means watching how she treats service workers, how she handles a stressful inconvenience, and whether she takes responsibility for miscommunications with her friends. You have to watch out for specific toxic profiles hiding in the fog. The princess, for example, demands constant expensive gestures, lacks basic empathy, and treats strangers as if they are beneath her. Then there is she lives in a state of endless chaos, constantly dragging you into her crises, and often masks deeper issues like substance abuse. At their core, people rarely change. If you fail to rationally identify these traits while the chemical fog is thick, you guarantee yourself years of future sorrow. A healthy relationship requires a rare alignment of the body, the mind, and the heart. Settling for physical chemistry alone is a calculating risk. Biology is a strictly uncompromising gatekeeper. It initiates the attraction, but it will not sustain a toxic foundation. So you've survived the biological audit of the first kiss and manually pierced the chemical illusion of limerence. What happens next? When the doors close and the fog finally lifts, the real work of building genuine, lasting intimacy begins. Don't navigate this minefield alone. Master the art of romance and the secrets of the bedroom by grabbing a copy of the complete book from the link in the description. Before you even touch a woman, the deepest elements of her sexual response are already at work. Her mind is her most powerful erogenous zone. If she doesn't feel emotionally engaged and physically safe with you, the highly sensitive nerve clusters mapped across her body remain completely dormant. They simply will not ignite. But creating that engagement means navigating a minefield of societal programming. From the moment she becomes conscious of her gender, she is taught to compare herself against digitally manipulated standards of beauty. You cannot master the physical landscape of a woman's body without first dismantling these psychological blockades. Her physical desire depends entirely on feeling secure in her own skin. By the time a woman turns 60, she will have viewed roughly 6 million advertisements, actively dictating what feminine beauty is supposed to look like. This flood of idealized, unattainable imagery creates a chronic, painful preoccupation with her own appearance. Beauty becomes a daily survival strategy, where she constantly measures her worth by how closely she matches an impossible standard. Look at this comic illustrating the daily reality. A woman looks in the mirror and focuses on perceived flaws, magnifying them into self-rejection. Meanwhile, men look in the mirror and see absolute perfection. Because her relationship with her body is so fragile, even a single careless joke about her weight or clothing can sever her emotional connection entirely. This cartoon strips away the humor to reveal a strict law of intimacy. When she asks how she looks, there is only one acceptable answer. You must tell her she is beautiful, no matter what. Her sexual desire is inextricably linked to feeling desirable. Reversing the damage of society's unrealistic expectations and making her feel adored is the non-negotiable prerequisite to any physical intimacy. In the 1970s, researchers at the Kinsey Institute, founded by Alfred Kinsey, studied the mating behaviors of almost every mammal on Earth to better understand human sexuality. When observing mice, horses, lions, and elephants, the researchers found that these mating acts were incredibly fast, mechanically efficient, and almost entirely devoid of patience. Then they observed the porcupine. A male porcupine cannot simply act on instinct. If he approaches too quickly while her defensive quills are raised, he will be severely injured. Instead, he sits in front of her, gently and persistently stroking her face until she lowers her quills. This slow, deliberate pacing mirrors the reality of human female arousal. A woman requires a patient, non-threatening approach to lower her natural defenses before she is ready for physical connection. Men typically operate with far fewer prerequisites. They can transition directly from initial interest to physical readiness in seconds, whereas women require a cascade of emotional and physical conditions to be met first. Taking things slowly is a strict biological requirement. It is the only reliable way to convert passive interest into active physical readiness. Despite navigating these complex prerequisites, Most adult men cannot accurately label a basic diagram of the female reproductive system. Look at this cross-section of female genitalia. Here, located where the inner lips meet, is the clitoris. It is highly sensitive, packed with exactly as many nerve endings as the head of a penis, but compressed into a fraction of the size. If we move inside the vaginal opening, just under the pubic bone, we find the G-spot. When a woman becomes aroused, this area of ridged tissue swells and becomes highly receptive to stimulation. But sexual anatomy extends far beyond the pelvis. This chart highlights the sheer volume of erogenous zones distributed across the entire female form. The neck, the ears, the small of the back, and the thighs all contain nerve clusters designed for pleasure. Focusing exclusively on localized genital mechanics while ignoring this full-body sensory map guarantees an incomplete experience. True pleasure requires engaging her entire nervous system. This comprehensive approach is absent in pornography. Those videos are built around a visually driven, masturbatory fantasy that completely ignores the reality of how women actually experience pleasure. Clinical researchers measure a gap called the discordant effect. For women, physical engorgement does not automatically equal psychological desire. A physiological response only translates to actual desire 10% of the time. The aggressive, piston-like rhythm taught by adult films fails to bridge this gap. It treats a complex, emotionally dependent system like a simple mechanical switch. To achieve real intimacy, you have to abandon the scripts learned from screens. You must actively court her psychological desire through genuine, attentive connection. When a woman feels safe enough to let go of impossible beauty standards weighing her down, her mind takes over as the ultimate driver of her desire. You build this safety through systemic anticipation. A midday text, holding her hand, or taking over a stressful chore spikes her dopamine, signaling to her brain that something rewarding is on the horizon. Even the way you look at her plays a crucial role. Sustained eye contact and a genuine Duchenne smile, a smile that reaches the corners of your eyes, prove to her nervous system that your intentions are safe and sincere. This continuous loop of emotional safety triggers a full physical response. Her body opens up organically, driven by the secure environment you have cultivated. Becoming the greatest lover she has ever had means writing an ongoing story of trust in her mind. Everyday safety is the ultimate foreplay. Maintaining this level of intimacy, especially against the chaos and exhaustion of a long-term relationship, requires ongoing study and deliberate practice. Let's start with a scenario most men know well: waiting outside a fitting room. When a man shops, he hunts. He wants a specific item, like jeans, finds it, buys it, and leaves. A woman's approach is different. She gathers. She sets out to see what's available, without always knowing exactly what she'll bring back. This divide actually traces back to our earliest ancestors. While early men hunted for specific game, early women took on the role of foragers. Their daily task was to scour the wild for edible, non-poisonous plants, medicine, and materials to keep their families alive. They couldn't predict what they would find, so they had to carefully evaluate everything they came across. So, when a woman spends hours browsing the aisles, it isn't an arbitrary waste of time. She is tapping into a deeply ingrained biological drive to evaluate and gather the best possible resources for her family. Millions of years of relying on these foraging skills physically shaped female cognition. Distinguishing safe berries from toxic ones required an exceptionally sharp memory for objects and details. This bar chart compares how many objects men and women can recall from a cluttered space. Researchers found that men remembered an average of 7 objects, women remembered an average of 20. Modern women rely on this superior object memory to track the complex, overlapping needs of their households. Because of this ability to organize details, women make 85% of all household buying decisions. When a man misinterprets this biological advantage as an annoyance, he quickly gets frustrated. That frustration creates tension, setting the stage for a much larger biological clash, domestic conflict. The friction that starts at the shopping mall often follows couples back into the living room. When a disagreement breaks out, biology takes over again. When a woman brings up a complaint or negative issue, the male nervous system doesn't process it as a simple conversation. It perceives a literal predator attack and primes the body to respond with primal aggression. This reaction is a neuroscientific state known as diffuse physiological arousal, or DPA. This factor graphic illustrates the physical metrics of a man experiencing DPA. The heart rate aggressively spikes past 100 beats per minute, adrenaline floods the bloodstream, and the nervous system triggers a full fight or flight alert. In this state, a man's peripheral vision narrows, his hearing is compromised, and his capacity for empathy shuts down entirely. He is biologically forced into a corner where his only options are to attack or completely stonewall and shut down. His physiological response to feeling criticized literally incapacitates his biological ability to listen, process, or resolve the argument he is currently having. While the flooded male brain is trying to either fix the problem or escape the room, his partner has a completely different goal. During a conflict, a woman primarily wants to be heard and understood. According to comprehensive studies on everyday anger, a woman's frustration usually stems from 3 root causes: feelings of powerlessness, a sense of injustice, or the irresponsibility of others. Rather than the male fight or flight response, the female biological reaction to these stressors is an instinct to tend and befriend. During moments of stress, a woman's biology drives her to seek emotional attunement and safety. This puts her directly at odds with a partner who is physiologically flooded and pulling away. Because men so frequently withdraw into DPA during stress, women biologically require a tribe of female friends to secure the social support and connection they need. We see this same survival strategy in our closest evolutionary relatives. Female primates spend hours grooming each other to solidify their social networks and ensure they have protection against predators. When human women tend and befriend, their bodies release oxytocin, a hormone that actively lowers their physical stress response. This line chart tracks mortality risk among nurses with breast cancer. Women who were socially isolated faced a massive 66% spike in premature death risk, while those with 10 or more friends maintained a stable baseline and were far more likely to survive. Data shows that a man relies on his wife to live a longer life, but a woman biologically depends on her female friendships to literally survive. You cannot apply logic, reasoning, or negotiation skills to talk a woman out of being sad or mad. Those tools fail to address the core emotional pain. To override the biology of conflict, a man must first recognize the physical signs of DPA and forcibly downregulate his nervous system. That means taking a deep breath to lower the heart rate, or explicitly asking for a 20-minute break to distract himself and calm down. Once his heart rate drops, the mental override begins. He must replace his primal defensiveness with an active curiosity to uncover the specific pain underneath her complaint. Relationship mastery doesn't mean avoiding conflict entirely. It means controlling your own physiological reactions so you can become a safe space for your partner. To achieve that, researchers recommend using 3 specific questions the next time your partner is in pain. What do you need? What are you concerned about? And what are you feeling? Asking these questions and truly listening to the answers bridges the millions of years of evolutionary distance between the hunter and the forager. Stop fighting your biology and start embracing the science of relationships. When we think of absolute genius, we picture the man who unraveled the mechanics of the universe. Yet the mind that grasped relativity struggled to understand how to keep a marriage intact. He isn't the only one. Stephen Hawking, another titan of physics, spent his life mapping black holes, but admitted women remained a mystery to him. Pure logic and intellect are often insufficient for maintaining a lifelong partnership. A different approach is required. In 1914, with his own relationship falling apart, Einstein attempted to save his marriage by treating it like a mathematical equation. He presented his wife, Mileva, with a written list of conditions. She was to keep his study neat, bring him 3 meals a day, stop talking to him the moment he requested it, and expect no physical intimacy. Her response to these demands was swift. She packed up their 2 children and left him, eventually securing every cent of his Nobel Prize payout. You cannot logic your way into a successful relationship. Sustaining love requires moving past a checklist and embarking on an active emotional journey. Relationships begin with a stage called limerence. It is an intoxicating cocktail of dopamine, oxytocin, and testosterone designed by evolution to drive reproduction. This chemical high suppresses the fear response and can blind judgment. Because of this, it is an unreliable time to make a lifelong commitment. As limerence plummets, a baseline for trust emerges. The evolutionary drive shifts toward reproductive care. But building trust is volatile, marked by jagged peaks and valleys. Every argument tests one central question: will you be there for me? Stage 3 occurs when that volatility settles into loyalty. A couple makes the conscious choice of monogamy and builds a shared purpose that bonds them for life. Moving through these stages is a discipline. Real love is not a chemical accident, but a commitment maintained through conscious choice and mutual sacrifice. The arrival of children acts as a crucible for the relationship. When a woman becomes a mother, her biological priorities shift to ensure her offspring survives. She enters a biological and psychological matrix called the motherhood constellation. Her focus narrows to a tight, protective bond built entirely around the child. A father often feels left out as her oxytocin levels shift toward the newborn. These feelings of displacement are a common part of the transition. The zero competes with the infant for attention. The hero accepts a new role, becoming an active partner in the family's survival. In 1960, John Quinn demonstrated this commitment by using a heavy metal chain and padlocks to bind his wrist to his wife's, forcing the hospital to let him stay by her side in the delivery room. A father's role is biologically distinct. While mothers are often patient teachers, fathers use physical, hyperactive play to help a child develop. This unpredictable play teaches an infant to self-regulate. Studies show that a father's presence is a predictor of a child's IQ and their capacity for empathy as an adult. Protecting the relationship requires understanding how it breaks. Betrayal is rarely a sudden event, but a slow slide caused by continuous emotional distance. Avoiding conflict to not rock the boat or ignoring a partner's dreams creates the fractures that eventually lead to an affair. Preventing this drift requires the discipline to never stop dating her and to actively honor her inner world. Research indicates that kissing for exactly 6 seconds during every parting and reunion floods the brain with oxytocin. These daily actions lower the brain's fear response, actively building a foundation of trust and loyalty. Unlike Einstein's failed logical demands, the science of relationships boils down to a single behavioral choice. The zero avoids sacrifice, turns away from his partner's needs, and stays focused on himself. The hero turns toward his partner. He commits to her well-being and weathers any storm by her side. Choosing to be the hero is an act of self-interest. Married men live longer, earn more money, and are consistently healthier than those who stay uncommitted. Ultimately, loving an incredible woman for a lifetime is without a doubt the absolute most rewarding adventure that life has to offer. This is just the beginning. Click the link in the description to buy the book, apply its lessons, and truly become the hero.